if someone is going to be able to come in here and right the ship and be a much better head coach, even though they don't come from the tree, they don't come from the family, then I think you should probably do that. A team with a lot of cap space, they have to spend a lot of cash over the next few years. I think it's a coveted job. And I think that you should open up to all of the worthy candidates.
I agree. I also just think we underrate constantly around here the words that Robert Kraft has given us on the record, which is not to say that you should believe everything that Robert Kraft says, and understands he's very adept in the public spotlight and how to present things, and always insists to remind you, I was once a fan in those bleachers at Foxboro Stadium. But the comment that matters most is that he believes Jerod Mayo has, quote, no ceiling as a head coach. He said that. So as much as the headlines might be from my reporting or your reporting or Giardi's reporting or Tommy Kern's reporting, Robert Kraft said something a year ago that matters more than almost any of that combined. Jerod Mayo has no ceiling as a head coach. It's hard to find a head coach with a better potential or profile than someone that the boss believes has no ceiling. All right, welcome back to the Pats Interference Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. It has been a long time since I was sitting here and speaking into a microphone. It has not been a long time, though, since I spoke with Kyed, colleague at Herald, who is a large wrestling event last night with his daughter. I'm eager to hear about that. But first, a couple of housekeeping notes, because what does anyone love to do more but than to watch someone else clean their own house? And for me on the podcast, it's just to say a couple of things. We do not have any film notes from the Patriots win over the Broncos. Great win, very well quarterback game, one of the best, I thought, of the post-Brady era. Granted, not a high bar, but well done, Bailey Zappi. Christian Barmore, 5 pressures. Maybe I am doing notes. I can't keep myself in these post-recap episodes. Anyway, that's it. If you want more, please go to thebostonherald.com and find my full film review. As always, plenty of breakdowns, numbers, GIFs, everything you want, it's all right there. So we're skipping over the Broncos, our normal spiel. The spiel today, instead, looking ahead to not only just the Bills game, Doug and I will preview pretty quickly, because, again, they're 12.5-point underdogs. We kind of understand where this is going to go. Maybe we have a surprise, but we're not going to spend the whole episode on that. We are going to look ahead even further to 2024 and run down the major areas of this team and how differently they might look in a year, because I don't know. Everyone around this time has year-in review. I want to fast forward. I want to go ahead when we're on the precipice of 2025 and what the New England Patriots might look like, plus some mailbag questions. You guys, as I always say, brought it, and so we only have about 4 or 5 of those, and then we're going to get Doug out of here. So, wrestling or me keeping the house? What do you want to talk about before we do all that?
Well, wrestling was fun with Olivia. I haven't kept up with wrestling in quite a few years, but Olivia found some of my old wrestling figures, said that she wanted to go to a wrestling show. It was perfect. 2 days after Christmas, that was my Christmas present to her. Nice. And she had a blast. She got to slap Seth Rollins' hand. She brought her Becky Lynch Barbie there. She couldn't believe that she got to slap Seth Rollins' hand while wearing my wife's old Seth Rollins Christmas sweater. Just all around a great time. Shout out to formerly Megan O'Brien, now Megan Morant, who's she used to be the Patriots, reporter / host, in-house team host reporter. Now she works for WWE. She hooked us up with some great tickets for the event, and Olivia had a great time. I
love it. Shout out Megan O'Brien, indeed. I always felt like she should have, and I haven't spoken to Megan in a long time, honestly, I ran into her at the gym when I was going to a place in Jamaica playing at Planet Fitness very randomly in a COVID year, where it was like, I have not seen you because I've not been at the stadium in over a year. And you did the instinctive thing at that time, which was to come in for a hug. How are you? And then you're like, oh, I'm wearing a mask in this very tight, compact space where there's very poor ventilation. But like, you needed to do something in the day in those days. Anyway, but so she should have done something with like the artist formerly known as MOB. Which, hey, might have resulted in another rap song, but that is for you to Google at home, not for Doug and I to relive or detail any further. But great to hear from Megan, and a very nice gesture by her and to Olivia. Okay, how different the Patriots will look in 2024. This is how the game works. We have 5 categories: offense, defense, coaching staff, front office, and overall on-field product. So you could talk about win-loss record. I'm not going to go predict games that the Patriots don't even know who 2 of their opponents are going to be next year. But just how good is the team? Where does it live in the landscape of the league in 2024? Right now, obviously, they're 4-11 in the bottom third, probably bottom quarter. And as you know, that's been life for the Patriots for a while here. So from 1 to 5, number 1, meaning the most change. This area of the 5 I just listed will undergo the most change. Obviously, 5 then, by extension, will be the most stable. You'll look at that and be like, I remember this. This was last year. So, number 5 on your list, Kyed, of the area of the Patriots that will change the least. This will be the most stable next year. Unsurprising. Number 5.
I would go with defense. And there certainly will be some changes on defense. There will be some new faces. There will be some departing faces. They really can't bring back the exact same group as this year, like they did last year, where they basically just like replicated the 2022 squad, brought that into 2023 just because of some contracts that are up. But I think that, the defense will undergo the least change, will be the most stable from this year to next year. I'm not sure who will be coaching that defense. I have to assume it will probably be someone who's already on staff. I don't think that they'd want to completely shake things up on something like the defense that's working so well right now. So just because it's been so good, because I do still think that key aspects of that defense will be back. Obviously, Christian Gonzalez will be back, Keon White, Juwan Bentley. A lot of the key guys from this year will be back. And I think that they'll look relatively the same. What was number 5 on your list?
Defense was number 5 for me. Thank you for following that back. It's a good teammate, as he always is. And I should step back and say, because the defense, as you alluded to, it matters who's coaching here, because it will dictate what system is being run here and how much change could usher in a trade of certain players that folks, bringing in a 4-down scheme or whatever you might want, say, you're not really a fit here because we don't need, players like Juwan Bentley, who lumbers around at 260 pounds, which fits very well in this Patriots scheme, which is a long way of saying we're baking in here, that we don't know who the head coach is. We don't know who the GM is. But I think the safest bet, as I've said for months, is still that Gerard Mayo takes over. And if Gerard Mayo takes over as the head coach, and Bill might stay, of course, they'll run the same defense, it's a safe bet that the defense will remain stable. And I think, frankly, even if they did bring in a new coach, there's a good talent level here, a good base with which to work. And we spent a lot of the season, and we're going to talk about this in the mailbag, Kyle Duggar's in a contract year, Josh Uche's in a contract year. I would bet, and this is like a 51% bet, that they re-sign one but not both. I'd be very surprised if they brought back both. But you still have, as you mentioned, Christian Barmore, Juwan Bentley, Jabril Peppers, Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones will be back. All of these different guys, Jelani Tavai, who's having a breakout year, that the talent, the scheme, I think we don't have to spend, honestly, much more time on this because I just think it's so stable. Not to mention guys like, as you said, Keon White and Marte Mapu, who might fill in for Kyle Duggar next year.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also options, even if it wasn't Gerard Mayo taking over as head coach, like maybe Gerard Mayo becomes the official defensive coordinator. Like maybe they bring in, I have no idea what's going to happen to like Patrick Graham next year, but like you could bring in someone who runs the Patriots defense just to make the personnel carry over as much as possible.
Right. All right, number 4 in your list. So this is less stable than the defense, but a little bit more change.
I would go with on-field product on this one, which isn't the best news for Patriots fans, and that I don't think the on-field product will change
or listener, because that is also number 4 on my list. So this will be a quick one as well. Keep going.
But I mean, I just think that there's only so much that you can probably do with this team to make it significantly better next year. And if the assumption is that the Patriots will have a rookie starting quarterback, how they get that, I'm not sure at this point. Like maybe they stick at number 4 and get Jaden Daniels. Maybe they trade up and get Drake May or Caleb Williams. Like they're probably not going to be a playoff team next year with a rookie quarterback in year 1. So I just don't see dramatic changes being made this offseason to immediately make them a Super Bowl contender or probably even a playoff team in 2024. That would probably come in like 2025 and beyond at this point, just because the product has been so bad. So that would be my number 4.
I'm glad you brought up Caleb Williams, because as we record here Thursday morning, Miller Moss, a human being I did not know existed, let alone was a good quarterback, because he just shredded Louisville for 6 or 7 touchdowns in the Holiday Bowl last night as USC romped without Caleb Williams. It's a 1-game sample. Louisville probably a little overrated relative to their AP ranking. But and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. Did that make you pause at all in the Caleb Williams conversation or your view of Caleb Williams?
I didn't watch the game last night. Like I mentioned, I was at wrestling, but I just think that Caleb Williams can do so much special stuff on the field that, like, you don't want to compare anyone to Patrick Mahomes, but there's like some Patrick Mahomes elements of him kind of moving around the pocket, running around, like doing special things, getting the ball out and like firing the ball 40 yards downfield. That, no, I don't think that like his replacement playing well would change my opinion on him. I think there's other things that are maybe slightly concerning about Caleb Williams, but like as an actual player and talent, I wouldn't be worried about that.
Okay. Yeah, just pause. I don't want anyone here freaking out or saying that I doubt Caleb Williams, but it's an interesting data point we didn't have until USC played a game without Caleb Williams, a quarterback, who, if you want a fuller breakdown, listen to an episode with Danny Kelly about 4, maybe 5 weeks ago, which was great. And he dove into actually the Mahomes neighborhood conversation. Anyway, I agree on on-field product strictly from the standpoint of, look, even if you finish 5-12, you win one of these next 2 games, and you improve to 7-10, in my eyes, that's not a whole lot different. Maybe the ways that you get there are different, but I think, if you wanted to build a case for, hey, this could be a wild card contender next year, it starts with the strength of schedule, which is not going to be the hardest in the league. It will, in fact, be replaced by a number of games against other fourth-place teams. You would think, you would hope, you would pray there's better offensive talent given the worst receiving core in the league and an offensive line that still, for 2 years running, has not had multiple starting caliber offensive tackles. You solve both of those problems, you're not cooking with gas, but like the stove's at least turning on. These are big upgrades at premium positions around a rookie quarterback who you would think, on balance, between what we've seen from Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi this year, could probably meet the middle level of their play. And then you think, well, against the hardest schedule in the league this year, with those injuries and lack of talent at receiver and offensive tackle, how many more wins would you have gotten if those other areas had been bumped up this year around that quarterback? And you might say 7-10 or 8-9, but that's the case. Do I necessarily believe all that? No, there's so much uncertainty, but I think, the on-field product will be better. Of course, we said this last year. How much is very much TBD.
So it used to be that the Patriots played their best football after Thanksgiving. Well, I'm here to tell you we don't have to wait for turkey and mashed potatoes and football for you to win and place your best bets of the year with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 with a single bet if the team that you pick wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, I'm telling you, there's no better time than now to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. I do it all the time. There's a wide range of options, too. If you don't like betting options like the money line, that's for me. If it's not for you, go for point spreads, player props, over-unders, and tons more. Just visit FanDuel.com/Boston and get your winning in the NFL season, no matter what the Patriots do. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Number 3.
Number
Please disagree with me.
This one was tough. I am going to say the front office. Just because I do think that there's a possibility, I don't know how remote it is, whatever it would be, that like Bill Belichick is back next season. Not all of the coaching staff, but a lot of the coaching staff remains the same. But Robert Kraft somehow convinces Bill Belichick to bring in another high-ranking voice in the front office who either has final say or can kind of combat some of Bill Belichick's thinking. So I think that, if Belichick's gone, then you're almost tied in the front office and the coaching staff. But if Bill Belichick's back, then I do still think that there could be there's a world in which Bill Belichick is back and there's still changes to the front office. So that's why I would go front office being more stable than the coaching staff.
So I went coaching staff here because I think, again, working from the assumption that Gerard stays, he might be willing to keep on at Brian or Steve Belichick, presuming they don't go with Bill if he finds another job elsewhere, or a lot of the infrastructure in place. Like, these are his guys, some of whom I can tell you share an agent with Gerard, get them raises, keep them there, keep them happy, and then go forward with what they would feel is a new program. There's new life. There's a new head coach. Again, that's a big assumption. Maybe I'm wrong. I certainly wouldn't bet any kind of money on that or bet anything on the Patriots. But the point stands that I think the front office, not only do you have to carry over a little bit longer going into the draft, where you see a lot of turnover in May with different scouts taking different jobs, executives move on, and this happens everywhere where there's a new regime installed. I think that the coaching staff, between whether it's Gerard or somebody else, and Bill O'Brien staying, because I think is a good likelihood. He signed through 2025 is my understanding, that there's a lot already in place where like the infrastructure's there between the offensive coordinator, the probable head coach, the defensive system he wants to run. It's just a matter of filling in those little different spots. So that's why I think that'll be more stable than the front office. But over time, by the time we get to the end of 2024, the front office with a new decision maker up top will have filled in with new scouts once we get to May and June down to the bottom to really set their vision, whatever that might be, and whoever that might be.
Did I just mess this up, even though we had like a 10-minute conversation about this? So I said I think I should have said coaching staff for number 3.
Okay. I also might argue against myself. You know, let's bail ourselves out really quickly. This is tied for second, both of these. But I think I'm going to argue for a more stable coaching staff. So if I did a bad job of listening, I apologize.
I think I would say a more stable coaching staff too, actually, then, because I was saying that like there's more of a chance that there's going to be a change in the front office than a coaching staff. So yeah, I guess we're agreeing that coaching staff would be 3 as being more stable because, yeah, like you said, like Bill Belichick might be back. Like we don't know for sure that Bill Belichick's not going to be back. And if Bill Belichick's back, I think all of the defensive staff is back. You can see you're already seeing changes on the offensive staff. I think they need to make changes on the offensive staff. But like you mentioned, even if Gerard Mayo is back, a lot of that defensive staff could be back as well. Maybe some of the offensive staff too. So number 2 as being less stable, I would say the front office. And I also think that, there's a lot of talented people in the front office, but like if Gerard Mayo takes over as head coach, then there's a very good chance, or there's a chance, or whatever it is, that it's just a completely outside general manager that's hired who wants to bring in all of his own guys, which means that the entire front office could be changed from this year to next year. Whereas I think there's less of a possibility that the entire coaching staff would be turned over from this year to next year.
I'm hesitant to speak words beyond that. Just understanding, I believe the coaching staff will be more stable than the front office. So number 2 is the front office, second most likely to undergo major change. Yeah. And again, I think it really just has to do with the vision. I know what Gerard Mayo's vision is going to be as a head coach or defensive coordinator. I know what Bill O'Brien's vision as an offensive coordinator is going to be. And again, I think it's likely he stays, given Kraft wanted him there, brought him there, and he's still signed for a couple of more years. Mm-hmm. The front office is such a question mark. And it's not only from a philosophical standpoint, where like Gerard's going to be aligned, I think, with any new GM that might come in. And if it's Belichick, we know his philosophies. I also wonder, though, that if Belichick does stay, he's going to have to make a compromise. And that compromise, based on Robert Kraft's comments, not your analysis, not my analysis, is that the drafts are not good enough. Right. He said that years ago. And we've seen that bear out specifically in 2022, where Cole Strange gets hurt. Jack Jones is already off the team. Tyquan Thornton's the worst receiver on the team. You got nothing really in day 3. We'll see more about Marcus Jones. Like, that's a huge unknown with the front office. And yet, you and I both agree that's not the area of the team that in 2024, when we do this a year from now, will be the unit or area that's undergone the most change.
Right. Yeah, that would be the offense for me. Just because you should have a new quarterback. Ramondre Stevenson would stay pretty stable at running back, but you should have a few new wide receivers. I mean, we know for a fact that Kendrick Bourne is a free agent. Who knows what's going to happen with Juju Smith-Schuster and Devontae Parker. At tight end, Mike Gesicki is a free agent, and Hunter Henry is a free agent. On the offensive line, you're probably going to have at least one new tackle, depending on what happens with Mike Owenu. And even if Mike Owenu stays, he could wind up moving over to guard. Like, you could have 2 to 3 new offensive linemen in there as well. You add all that up, and more than half of your offense might have new starters in 2024. And who knows what's going to happen there coaching-wise as well, because if Bill Belichick is not back, then there's a possibility that Bill O'Brien is not back either unless that new head coach wants to keep him on board, which I would say is a possibility, but we don't know that for certain. So, yeah, I think that there is guaranteed changes that will be coming on offense that will be pretty major ones at key positions. So that's why that's my number one.
Co-signed on all of that. I mean, the roster is the most important part, right? And even the players that fans might want to part with based on their salaries. Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker. I've covered this multiple times in the pod. That gets sticky quickly. It's not easy to ship those off unless you want to attach an asset, a draft pick, a young player to them in a trade just to get off of that salary, which the Patriots might not be willing to do. And look, Juju has not played in the last 2 games, but he was pretty good in Pittsburgh. And that's not a case to say you should stay another season given his ongoing knee injuries, which is still absolutely an issue. It's just to say that, there's a lot from a roster standpoint. There's a lot from a coaching standpoint, a scheme, and where all that meets in the middle, as much as you might want to completely untangle yourself from this, that's hard to figure out. But I think once the vision is set from a GM standpoint, how willing are you to take on dead money? From a coaching standpoint, we need to get faster, whatever it might be. We'll learn a lot more. And that's why I think based on the results or anything that you talked about or I just did, that, offense is headed for major, major change. Let me ask you this, though, because I'm glad you've reiterated that Belichick might be back. And this is something that, again, I don't believe is likely to happen, but absolutely could. And if it's not then Gerard Mayo, who, again, I've said for months I believe is still the favorite, where do you think Kraft completely opens us up to like a legitimate coaching search and is willing to go to a different tree, even given the foundation that's been laid here for, hell, you even go back to Parcells?
I think he should. I think he should do a full coaching search, see if someone blows him away or if, whatever happens. I don't know how likely that is, but I don't know. I wouldn't shy away from it. I think that, if someone is going to be able to come in here and right the ship and be a much better head coach, even though they don't come from the tree, they don't come from the family, then I think you should probably do that, whether that's Ben Johnson or someone else. Like, I think that this should be a pretty coveted job around the NFL. Like, as long as the Patriots are picking in the top 5 or whatever, then you have a chance to get one of the top quarterbacks, really solid, good ownership, a team willing to spend, like a team with a lot of cap space. They have to spend a lot of cash over the next few years. I think it's a coveted job. I think that you should open up to all of the worthy candidates.
I agree. I also just think we underrate constantly around here the words that Robert Kraft has given us on the record, which is not to say that you should believe everything that Robert Kraft says, and understands he's very adept in the public spotlight and how to present things, and always insists to remind you, I was once a fan in those bleachers at Foxboro Stadium. But the comment that matters most is that he believes Gerard Mayo has, quote, no ceiling as a head coach. He said that. So as much as the headlines might be from my reporting or your reporting or Giardi's reporting or Tommy Kern's reporting, Robert Kraft said something a year ago that matters more than almost any of that combined. Gerard Mayo has no ceiling as a head coach. It's hard to find a head coach with a better potential or profile than someone that the boss believes has no ceiling.
No,
that's why amid all this, I just still think he's the favorite, and it's not close. But he would be wise, as you said, to see what else out there, because you look at the offensive coordinator search last year, those weren't real offensive coordinator interviews. No. They were interviews to be, hey, Adrian Klein, you want to be our offensive line coach? Hey, Keenan McCardell, after you brought up Justin Jefferson to be arguably the best receiver in the league, might you want to jump ship? That's what those were. So maybe in a head coaching process, bring somebody in, offer them a little bit more money if they're an OC, and there's your new system. More speculation. Ready to talk some Bills?
No, but let's do it anyway.
Okay. So the Buffalo Bills. Actually, you know what? This is the most interesting part. Speaking of words people put on the record that got glossed over, yesterday in his press conference, Bill Belichick noted that 3 weeks ago, quote, everyone thought they were in trouble, which is, first of all, listening to the noise of the media speculation. Second of all, not listening to even your own noise, but those belonging to the Bills. And I don't have an issue with that. It just obviously runs contrary to what you hear out of there.
Definitely.
And look, Bill has a point. The Buffalo Bills are 9-6.
3 weeks ago, they were coming off a 37-34 loss at the Eagles. Then they beat the Chiefs in Kansas City 20-17, then blew the doors off of the Dallas Cowboys at home 31-10, and squeaked by the Chargers over the weekend 24-22. You probably didn't watch it because it was only on Peacock. But the Bills at 9-6, offense second by DVOA, defense is 12th, and special teams is 18th. So this is still a very talented team, a team the Patriots know well. And I don't know, do you want to just talk about Bill's comment? Because you and I both got out of the press conference being like, well, that was fun.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting because, yeah, I mean, he says all the time, like, oh, I don't spend a lot of time, like, listening to, watching the TV analysts or, like, reading the press coverage that's out there. And all of a sudden he was aware that people thought that the Bills were in trouble after some losses. So, yeah, I did find that a little bit fascinating. As far as what I find most interesting about the Pats offense versus the Bills defense this week, I know this is kind of simplifying matters a little bit, but I'm personally curious to see if Bailey Zappi can look as good against the Bills defense as Mac Jones did in that week 7 win. Because, I mean, we were talking about it yesterday. Mac Jones went 25 of 30, 272 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. We had been waiting really for 2.5 seasons at that point for Mac Jones' signature win as the Patriots starting quarterback. And that's it at this point, that win over against the Bills in week 7. I'm certainly less convinced that the Patriots can do it on the road when these games matter so much to the Bills now at this point in the season. But overall, Bailey Zappi has looked better than Mac Jones this season. So if Mac Jones could do that in week 7, then there's at least a world in which Bailey Zappi could replicate that here in week 17 as well. I don't think it's likely, but I'm just kind of interested to see a 1-to-1 comparison of how Bailey Zappi looks against the Bills defense versus how Mac Jones did.
It's a great call. Couple of things I would add to that. Rhamondre Stevenson out, Kendrick Bourne out. Those guys factored in that game against the Bills, not in an overwhelming way, but in a way that the Bills had to account for them then that they will not here obviously on Sunday. And so for Bailey Zappi, who's also dealing with the banged up offensive line, what I'm really curious, and I think this is going to be a big day for Demario Douglas. That's capital M in Demario, by the way.
Yeah, out of nowhere.
That he. Not only have reporters been misspelling his name the entire season, the man, as a boy, misspelled his own name from like whenever he was first writing until the 3rd grade, until according to Demario Douglas, his mom goes, "You're spelling that wrong." Anyway.
Well, it's not just, I think the team, we didn't get it from nowhere. The team is spelling it wrong too, I believe.
True.
And
Absolutely.
I think that Liberty did too.
How did this happen? Where can we just have his mom just work with the PR staffs at some point to correct all of us, because she seems to be the only one that knows what's going on.
It has been fixed on Patriots.com. I'm not sure when it was fixed, but there is now a capital M. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, Demario. Actually, I don't know if I'm saying it wrong, but
I think it's still Demario. It's just a capital M. Yeah,
excellent.
Like Devontae as his capital V.
Maximum confusion. Demario Douglas is going to have a big game, because he had 74 total yards in that game against the Bills. And it wasn't even just the yardage. It was how they weaponized him with motion at the snap and motion before the snap. Because the Patriots in that game against the Bills looked at their defense. I can tell you this for a fact from people I talked to. Said, you are slow. So how do you beat slow defenses? Well, you weaponize your fastest players. And not only just sending them across and deep and back, but before the snap, running across the line of scrimmage, or at the snap as you snap the ball. And the Patriots did this at almost twice the rate that they had done in all of their games previous. Like, this was a huge jump to using motion at the snap on 24% of the time to give Demario Douglas a head start, to give Kendrick Bourne a head start, and then to sometimes use them as decoys, right? And then run plays the other way. And what this did was allow them to average 10.6 yards per play on those plays. Motion is not a cure-all. It's not something we should always mistake for productivity. Sometimes it's just activity, guys moving around. But in this instance, against that defense, and specifically with that player, Demario Douglas, I think that's going to be a huge thing. Do they go back to that well? Do they put even more on his plate? If they go away from it, I think it's a mistake, because where else are you going? But that was such a key in that game that I just think you have to go back to it again and use it even more.
2 points on that. One is that, like, Patriots don't have a lot of talent in their skill players, but they do actually have a lot of speed right now. If you account for Demario Douglas, Jalen Reagor, Tyquan Thornton, like there are other guys that they could do that with as well. They won't be as productive as Demario Douglas, but there are other ways to use speed in those, Patriots pass catchers. Other thing is that you mentioned obviously a good point that they won't have Kendrick Bourne, they won't have Ramondre Stevenson. Offensive line is even more banged up. I just want to shout out Bailey Zappi for. Obviously, he hasn't been perfect. There were halves in 3 of his starts that were not good, but he's been relatively productive despite being without basically all of his top pass catchers or playmakers and at least one of his 4 starts this season. Hasn't played with Ramondre Stevenson since his first start. Has played games without Devontae Parker, without Juju Smith-Schuster, without Demario Douglas, without Ramondre Stevenson, without Trent Brown, without offensive linemen. And he just kind of keeps on churning. And I think that last week against the Broncos was so impressive from Bailey Zappi, just given all of the offensive playmakers that were not on the field. Hunter Henry included in that as well. So at some point, I think it would catch up to Bailey Zappi in the Patriots offense. Maybe that's this week. But just want to give him credit where it's due, that he's been decent despite so many injuries on offense.
Absolutely. And I think decent is the operative word, right? Like I said this on BST last night, was just there's no dishonor in being a good backup quarterback.
Right.
And that's what he's been. Like in that Denver win, one of their best wins of the year, they still only scored 19 points. And part of that absolutely is a function of just the lack of talent around him. They couldn't run the ball, but he found a way and made big plays. And specifically, okay, I broke. I'm finally going to give some film notes because this was the essence of that film review yesterday, is that the Patriots offense has become much more explosive with Bailey Zappi than it was with Mac Jones. And this is partly because of players like Devontae Parker, who got both of his 50-50 balls against the Broncos. It's part his willingness to throw deep in a way that Mac Jones had won a single completion that was beyond 20 yards downfield from October 8th until he was finally benched for good against the Giants. When defenses look at that tape in the middle of the season, they go, we don't have to defend that. He's just not going to do it. Right. And so 3 of the Patriots' 5 games with their highest explosive play rates, runs over 10 yards or passes over 20, have come with Bailey Zappi. 8.9% of their plays were explosive against the Broncos. 7.3 of them were explosive against the Steelers, and 6.4 of them, believe it or not, were explosive against the Chargers. They didn't score any points or a lot of problems that game. And simultaneously, with Bailey Zappi, they've had 3 of their 5 worst games by success rate, meaning they're getting more explosive, but they're doing 2 steps forward, 1 steps back, because success rate is how often you stay on schedule. How often are you ahead of the chains? Mac Jones was a on-schedule success rate quarterback, which made his mistakes, his turnovers, all that more damaging because you didn't have the margin for error or ability to go downfield. And so that kind of trade-off, I think, is interesting in a lot of different ways that we're not going to get into, but just from a philosophical standpoint with this offense. They wanted to be on schedule. Bill O'Brien said it time and time and time again and run early on first down. Bailey Zappi said, we don't have to do that as long as we get these big plays, which he's providing. And that's how they're winning some of these games, in addition to scoring 4 more points per game with Zappi than Mac Jones. If, and this is a big if, you subtract the points given away at Dallas and against New Orleans on the pick 6 and the scoop and score. That's up to you if you want to do that. But you mentioned Bailey Zappi. Props to him. This is how he's doing it.
Yeah, and I think it works relatively well with the Patriots defense too, because the Patriots had 8 or 9 3 and outs, something like that, against the Broncos on Sunday. But you can trust your defense to then make that same stop. Like they can then force the same 3 and out. But yeah, no, it's working relatively well. They still need your quarterback, but Bailey Zappi is playing decent, and it's working better than it was.
Now, the 8.9% I mentioned explosive play rate doesn't sound like a whole lot, but again, that's every 3 drives you're getting a huge chunk play.
Right.
The only game that was higher for the Patriots this year from an explosive play rate standpoint was 10.9% against the Bills, which was Mac Jones' best start, his signature win, all of that. So I think it is a fair comparison in some ways, but we'll see what they have cooked up for Buffalo, which again, 12-point favorites at home. And if they win, clinch a playoff berth. Okay, Patriots defense versus Buffalo's offense. Couple of injuries in the back end to note. Jabril Peppers did not practice for the 4th straight time on Wednesday. Jalen Mills has a concussion. He also sat out practice Wednesday, which was a walkthrough. Bill finally lightening the load here late in the year. What interests you most about this matchup with Josh Allen?
I mean, one thing right away is that I think that there could be some serious issues in the back end of the Patriots defense. And I think that that's the number one concern is Josh Allen hitting some of those deep shots, so whether it's Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs, because if Jabril Peppers isn't playing, if Jalen Mills, who's dealing with a concussion, isn't playing, then your available safeties at that point are Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, and Marte Mapu. You'd have to force Kyle Duggar to probably play like almost 100% of snaps as a free safety or as a, playing the deep half of the field, which isn't his strength, and then just weakens the middle of the defense. And I think that's the number one thing that interests me in this game is just how do the Patriots construct that secondary? Because another option would be to play Miles Bryant more at safety, whether that's at free safety in the box, whatever it is. But the cornerback depth is already so annihilated where you have to bring in Marco Wilson in the back end of the season. Alex Austin and Sean Wade would have to play a bunch of snaps. Jonathan Jones would probably have to move back into the slot. And then you're talking about having Alex Austin, Sean Wade, or Marco Wilson covering Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs. So it's just like these injuries at safety are really compounding the issues in the secondary right now to where it could become like a 400-yard game from Josh Allen pretty easily if the Patriots can't get this figured out.
It's a great point by you, and you had a really good piece about just the state of the cornerback position going into that Denver game, where you still have Jonathan Jones, for a time your projected number one quarter. Christian Gonzalez took that over quickly, but he's a guy that they need more now than ever. He's been banged up all season because, as you mentioned, it's Alex Austin or Miles Bryant, Sean Wade. And Bryant, I think, will probably rotate because he did play some single high safety in Denver to alleviate some of those deep half concerns. Now, he still runs a 4.59 40 or whatever it is, and he's 5'9". But they trust him in that, and especially in the deep half. Wrote about Miles Bryant today. You can check it out. And so, yeah, it is an issue, not just from a matchup standpoint. I mean, Stephon Diggs is still Stephon Diggs. He has 69 more targets than any other Bills receiver. Gabe Davis on the other end, not as reliable. The Patriots don't have as much of a problem with him. But when he does catch the ball, he's averaging 16.1 yards per catch. That's a problem. So for me, I'm kind of interested in where they go schematically. Like I wrote in the columnist curse, reverse jinx, that Josh Allen was Belichick proof. Before that game in October, which the Bills lost, and Josh Allen fell to 6-2 against the Patriots over the last 3 years, averaging close to 30 points per game, and he still has the highest passer rating of anyone to have 5+ starts against Belichick and something like 200 pass attempts, because he's just a modern master. I mean, Bill compared him, or his development, when I asked him on Wednesday, to Tom Brady, of like, hey, you knew in the third season this is special and this is not going anywhere. And so for him, it's not just in the pocket, in the rocket arm, or extending plays and scrambling. He's willing to fit any ball into any window at any time, sometimes with most of his body out of bounds, and he can do it. So perfect defense is not good enough anymore for this supernova offense at quarterback. And yet, you still might be able to bait him into some dumb stuff, because that's the other side of that ability, is I can do this. I've done it before, but should I? And I think the Patriots need to get lucky. And that's just, it's part of the chess match. It's also how much can they bring out of Josh Allen that they really haven't consistently enough, because he's just so good.
Absolutely. Do we want to run through two keys?
Yeah. 3, 2, 1 breakdown, 3 keys, 2 matchups, and a wild card thought. And then we get a couple mailbag. Thank you for keeping me on schedule. My success rate in this podcast has been much lower than my explosive play rate. So rattle them off really quickly.
2 keys to victory on defense. Christian Barmore, Mac Wilson, whoever it's going to be, Josh Uche, they need to be coming up with key sacks on third down. We saw that against the Broncos, even a strip sack mixed in there. Patriots need a lot more of that against the Bills if there's any chance of winning. Key on offense is basically that Bailey Zappi has to play exactly as well as he did against the Broncos, but without that initial strip sack that he lost. It has to be like basically a perfect game for Bailey Zappi for the Patriots to win, if Patriots fans even want the Patriots to win this game. My matchup to watch is something that I was just mentioning. It's basically just whichever Bills receiver is not matched up against Jonathan Jones. I would imagine that's probably going to be Gabe Davis. I think that, it's certainly probably going to be Patriots playing sides. It's not going to be I don't think Jonathan Jones is going to be like shadowing Stephon Diggs or whatever, but whichever cornerback is lined up against either Shaun Wade or Alex Austin, I think is definitely a matchup to watch in this game, because that could go very poorly. And as I mentioned, it could be hard to even get that bracket coverage or double team without a dependable free safety in there as well. And a wild card thought. Come back to me on that one.
Okay, good. My key, look, we saw the double-edged sword of special teams. I don't have any hope for this unit, but you can't give 3 points away against the Bills. Like, you need to win the field position battle. You need to hit all of your field goals. You need to hit all of your extra points. And I think because the Bills are a below-average special teams unit, like, you can and should probably pull a fake at this point. Like, what do you have to lose? They haven't done it at all this year. I know I'm very pro-fake, trick play, all of that, but damn it, I'm right. Okay, so we need some spice there with the special teams. As far as a matchup, David Andrews has not allowed a pressure or a run stuff in 4 straight weeks. He is playing some of the best football of the season of any Patriots offensive lineman. He's not missed a single snap, and yet I'm a little worried against Ed Oliver, who's a Pro Bowl caliber player for the Bills that they did not see in October. Von Miller also was out from that game, because when everything's falling down around him, there's only so much David Andrews can do. And if he loses that matchup, I mean, it's over. And it wouldn't be, again, any kind of dishonor for him or Bailey Zappi to play poorly against a good Bills defense. But that pressure up the middle is always a big one. And so that's my matchup. And my wild card thought is we are not going to be in Buffalo. So that's not even a thought. It's just a reveal for us, which is difficult. Speaks to the season. Not going to get into the whole decision, but we'll be at home just like you.
My wild card thought, I think it's dangerous to put a Bills game on New Year's Eve at 1 p.m. because that means that Bills fans would probably be drinking from like 10 a.m. to like,
as they should,
like 2 a.m., something like that. It's just gonna be like, that's gonna be a long day of drinking for Bills fans. And, you know, maybe have that Bills game on New Year's Eve at 8 p.m. just to limit the time structure a little bit. But no, we won't be there. I'll miss being around Bills Mafia and all that stuff. It's a fun stadium. But for me personally, it definitely makes more sense for me to be around the family at this point than to be off in Buffalo. So there's my wild card thought if we want to get to the mailbag questions.
We do. All right, we're going to skip down here. You have a list, but I want to go to this one because we did talk about Zappi, and I think some people are having some rose-colored glasses, graduation goggles, whatever you want to call them. Matthew might be suffering from this. Quote, do you feel if Belichick had come out of camp and said we're having an open competition and let Mac and Zappi battle it out for the starting job, that the season wouldn't have gone up in flames like this?
I mean, Belichick basically did say that, and then it never happened. So it is kind of an interesting question. I think that there's a reason why Bailey Zappi was cut out of training camp in preseason, and that's because he was playing so poorly throughout the summer. So even if Bill Belichick had said, we've got an open competition, blah, 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 Mac Jones would have won that competition because he was practicing better than Bailey Zappi all the way up until he was permanently benched in week 13. So I really don't think that would have made a big difference. Who knows? Like, Mac Jones might still be practicing better than Bailey Zappi. Like, I think that that's just kind of what you're going to see because he was the first round pick. Technically, he's more talented than Bailey Zappi. It's just working better for Bailey Zappi in games right now. So, no, personally, I don't think that would have made a difference. What about you?
I agree, and I want to use it just to pivot to another question because, you know, you said Bailey Zappi stunk at training camp, and we covered every training camp practice available to the media. We watched every throw that Bailey Zappi took. I charted all of them, how many picks, his completion percentage, and there's a lot of noise in those stats. They're not absolute. Yeah. But you and I also talked separately to different people in the building about how that went. Some in the locker room, some on staff, some elsewhere, and they all came to the same conclusion, was that he stunk. And so that came up, obviously, when Bailey Zappi get cut. And I say that because, quote, Cat Flasher, some of these names I would never think to come across in my entire life. Cat Flasher, someone going around, I would assume flashing cats.
Don't go around flashing cats. Come on. That's just...
I guess if you do...
bizarre behavior.
Okay. We don't have time. Never mind. Cat Flasher wants to know, how do you know, speaking to me, what Bill thinks regarding a return next year? Did he say it? Did someone in the organization say it to you? Did another reporter report it to you? This is boring Journo 101 stuff, but I want to address this quickly because I think there is a complete lack of education, and totally understandably, no one was taught journalism in high school or middle school, but how the process works of gathering information. And the standard rule is, first of all, no reporter ever reveals their sources publicly. That's how you maintain trust. That is the deal when you go in with these people. But first, trust is a two-way street. I need to trust that so-and-so, people that I talk to, people that you talk to, are being honest with me. Understanding some people love to leverage the media for their own agendas. And the way you do that is by verifying something that someone has told you with another person, independent from them, in another conversation. And if you hear the same thing, that's typically when you can run with a report. Now, if you hear information within the team or closer to players or agents or whatever it might be, and over years and years and years, you develop such a relationship and trust with this person that you feel confident enough. And this takes time and trust that you can run with what they say. Sometimes you can do that. And that's when you'll see people cite per source. I'm not going to tell you things have not gotten a whole lot looser in my corner of sports journalism, speaking where I work, not how I conduct my business, when people start to run with single source reports. The issue with that is you incur a whole lot of risk because that person might think that they're right and could be wrong. They might have misheard something. They might have misremembered something. But it doesn't matter because soon as you, the reporter, put it out there, it's on you whether that's right or that's wrong. And people always forget when you were wrong. And they should. It's your reputation at stake. Word is bond. And so, again, I cannot tell you how I know that or how I came to be about it, but through that process, I hope you can infer how I came to learn that Belichick a couple of weeks ago, as I wrote, expressed uncertainty about his future, something that Mike Giardi reported this week. His word was doubt. I can't verify that. I asked around. I didn't get it. So I don't say it. But that's the process of how I got there. And you want to just say something quickly or we can move on?
No, I think we can move on. I think that you put that well, succinctly.
Yes. All right. We have two more. And Mudbird, Cat Flasher to Mudbird. I'm not going to answer this question today. We will get to it later about trade compensation packages, how different it is if you're picking 5 to 8 or 4 to 8 versus in the top 3. Really, really good question. We have 4 more months to figure that out, and it will be addressed here soon. So the question I'm going to ask you, Mace is asking, quote, what is the likelihood on when Uche and Duggar come back next year? I'm on the record. I think one of Uche or Duggar will be back. What say you?
Yeah, I would say I would put it in order probably of Onwenu, Duggar, then Uche. Maybe you see like Onwenu sign a long-term deal. Maybe they franchise Duggar and then Uche walks. Like I could see something like that happening. I do think the franchise tag could be in play for either Onwenu or Duggar. I just think it would be probably more likely for Duggar since for a franchise tag that encapsulates all offensive linemen. Like it's tackles, guards, and centers who all get lumped in as one. So if the Patriots view Mike Onwenu as a guard, they might not want to pay that franchise tag that includes tackles. Whereas for a safety, it's a little bit more cut and dry. So the likelihood that all of them are brought back, probably low, but I say that there's maybe like a 50% chance that at least 2 out of 3 are brought back. What are your thoughts right now?
I like that. I would say, 10% chance it's all 3. I think Uche is just going to have a much bigger market than the Patriots will be willing to offer. Again, based on scheme and coaching and who's in the front office. On Onwenu, I'd feel over 50%. Duggar's right around a coin flip. Franchise tag is a great point. It'll also depend on how they feel about Marte Mapu, who's a different player, less of an athlete than Kyle Duggar, and he's certainly smaller. But you know as well as I do, and the folks listening, that Belichick drafts their replacements while those guys are still on the roster. And I think Marte Mapu for Kyle Duggar was an obvious 1-to-1 replacement. One last thing to the last question, and I promise this is quick. The last part from Cat Flasher was, did another reporter report that to you? Meaning my reporting that Belichick had expressed uncertainty. No self-respecting reporter uses another media member as a source.
Right. No.
Sources are not media members. They are not PR members. They are people involved in situations or events that you are reporting on or someone close to them, at which point, again, you like to get a second source to confirm because that's the biggest part, is finding the truth. It's not what someone feels. We do a lot of reporting on feeling now, but it's no reporters ever citing another media member as a source on their story for how they know something. Okay.
One more point on Duggar, just before we get off that. And I know we have limited time.
Yep.
Like Adrian Phillips probably not going to be back next year. Jalen Mills probably not going to be back next year. So if Duggar's also not back, then you've got a 29-year-old Jabril Peppers and a 25, 26-year-old Marte Mapu. I just think that Bill Belichick, I don't know who's going to be the head coach, whether it's Belichick running the defense or Gerard Mayo running the defense, the Patriots typically like to have a deep reserve of safeties. So it's not necessarily just like, okay, we need 2 starting safeties, so that's going to be Jabril Peppers and Marte Mapu. I think they would prefer to go at least like 3 or 4 deep as far as starting caliber players. So that might entice them to bring back Duggar, even though Marte Mapu's still already on the team.
And they'll have the cap, they'll have the cash.
Right.
I would try to make it happen, and it's a great point by you. Okay, the last one. Ryan Ruth. Who is the grumpiest Patriots beat reporter? And why is it Mike Giardi?
It might be Giardi. I think it probably used to be Ryan Hannibal, but Ryan Hannibal is not on the beat anymore. Ryan Hannibal was always complaining about something, and maybe he learned that from Mike Giardi. They were close, so
very close.
Maybe Mike Giardi is like the godfather of grumpiness. Hannibal passed him for a little while, and now it's back to Giardi. But beyond Giardi, I'm not sure who it would be. Do you have someone other than Giardi in mind?
No, I mean, we should tell the folks at home, like Mike's been on the podcast plenty of times, friend of the podcast, personal friend. Hannibal, same to you and I.
Yes.
But you should be honest with your friends, and that's what we're doing here, granted in a public forum. I'll say this. You can be grumpy if you show up. Mike Giardi shows up.
He does.
Talks to people. Interacts with players in the locker room. We get 45 minutes every day that they practice. I'm there as often as I can. And you are too. And every reporter should be. Not every reporter is. That's a bummer.
It's an interesting mix, though, because there are some completely non-grumpy members of the Patriots beat. Like, no one would ever say that like Mike Reese is grumpy. Mike Reese and Chris Price might be like 2 of the least grumpy people I've ever met in my life. So you also have to kind
Dan Roach. Yeah,
Dan Roach, one of the least grumpy people I've ever met in my life. So, I wouldn't say that anyone and like you said, we like Mike, we're friends with Mike, we're joking. I wouldn't actually think of Mike as being an overly grumpy person. No one really comes to the stadium in a bad mood, which I think is the most important thing, Yeah. And I think that's something that I think of as far as grumpiness goes. Everyone comes in everyone's having fun down there,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, he is Kyed, rarely grumpy, with the Boston Herald, frequent guest on the Pass Interference podcast, one of the people's favorite guests, but he has to run off to another podcast. We're going to let you go. Thank you for hanging out. We will hopefully get to run this back for how differently things look in 2024, because hopefully you and I are very right. But as is always the case, that is never the case. So thank you for listening. Happy New Year to everyone. We will see you in 2024.